Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cracking open a book that has been, well, simultaneously hailed as a masterpiece of political science and condemned as a literal manual for evil.
We have to be talking about Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince.
We are.
It's a work that, it instantly generated controversy when he wrote it back in 1513. And then when it was finally published after his death in 1532, it earned him a reputation that has stuck for centuries.
Oh, absolutely. The very word Machiavellian is, shorthand for political cunning. But our mission today is to try and strip away that caricature.
That's a good way to put it.
Because this is the same book that was banned by the Catholic Church, but also, more recently, was recommended by the Pulitzer Prize-winning author Jared Diamond as a mandatory reading for President Obama.
Right. He called Machiavelli a crystal clear realist.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, we're going to dive deep to really understand the core mechanics of power as Machiavelli saw them. This essential, often brutal balancing act between what he calls Virtù and Fortuna.
And, of course, we have to settle the score on that famous misquote.
We definitely do.
So, if we really want to understand The Prince, I think we first have to understand the tradition it was written to basically demolish.
Okay.
Machiavelli's work was part of a very popular genre at the time called Mirrors for Princes.
And these weren't just, standard self-help books for royalty, were they?
Oh, not at all. Far from it. They were overwhelmingly moralistic.
So all about being a good Christian king.
Precisely. They were designed to give advice rooted strictly in Christian virtue. How to rule like an ideal saint, focusing on these sort of ornamental qualities like eloquence or mercy or grace.
So Machiavelli, who was a high-level government official in Florence before the Medici came back, he steps into this very refined, almost saintly conversation.
And he pulls the rug out entirely.
Right.
He just strips away all the ideals, all the ornamental stuff. He insists that he's drawing strictly from history and what he calls the effectual truth.
Verità effettuale.
Yes. Focusing only on actual political results, not on, as he puts it, imaginary republics and principalities that no one has ever actually seen.
Let's clarify that term, effectual truth, because that really is the core of his realism, isn't it?
It is. It's the focus on what is done in politics, regardless of what ought to be done.
Okay.
Machiavelli saw the reality of 16th century Italy. It was a chaotic, violent political landscape. So for him, writing a book based on Christian ideals was, frankly, useless.
Because nobody actually governed that way.
Nobody. He said that a prince who tries to rule like a saint, who ignores reality for some ideal, will quickly discover that he's been taught how to destroy himself.
And that's the punch.
Yeah.
His willingness to just state that uncomfortable truth out loud, that politics operates on a ruthless, amoral plane, that must have been the real shock.
Exactly. Critics were horrified. They called it a handbook for gangsters.
A handbook for gangsters, wow.
And the church, of course, eventually banned it in 1559. It's so important for us to realize that while, we might sort of accept his cynicism today, back in 1532, this was a massive, scandalous break from tradition. He was exposing the hypocrisy of power.
Okay, so let's move into the essential duality that he sets up. The way a ruler has to interact with the world, these twin forces a prince has to master, Virtù and Fortuna. Let's start with Virtù.
Right, so virtue is often mistranslated as just simple virtue.
Like moral goodness.
Exactly. But for Machiavelli, it's much, much grander than that. It encompasses all the essential qualities, the skill, the dynamism a leader needs to effectively govern. And this is key to maintain power over time. It's like competence married to courage.
So this is more than just political skill, like, building alliances or outmaneuvering your rivals. It's almost a spiritual force, a kind of drive.
It's the strategic ability to impose your will on events. Think of it as decisiveness, the willingness to make tough choices quickly, like invading a neighbor when the moment is right.
And having the courage to follow through.
Yes. A leader also needs charisma, the ability to inspire loyalty. Machiavelli praises people like Julius Caesar, not just for being a great general, but because he was an inspirational leader who commanded personal devotion.
So virtue is the competence, the internal skill set, the ability to control what you can control, but then you run headfirst into Fortuna.
Which is everything you cannot control. Fortuna is chance, the unpredictable, the uncontrollable elements.
Like what? Natural disasters.
Natural disasters, sudden economic crises, a key ally suddenly dying. It is pure randomness.
But what's so brilliant about Machiavelli is that he doesn't see Fortuna as, some insurmountable wall. He doesn't think a leader is helpless.
Not at all. He argues that fortune only judges about half of our actions. The other half is absolutely controllable through human action, through virtue, and through careful planning.
So you have to recognize the role of chance, but you never surrender to it.
Exactly. And this is where his famous analogy of the river comes in. He compares fortune to a torrential river that just destroys everything when no resistance is offered. But he says prudent people, when the weather is calm, must build dams and levees to minimize the impact of that flood when it eventually hits.
It's all about preparation and foresight.
It is. But the relationship between virtue and fortuna is dynamic. It's a high-stakes test. It requires the prince to be flexible, to change his own nature when the times change.
So a prince who is successful today could fail tomorrow if he can't adapt.
Precisely. If the times demand bold, risky action, but the prince is cautious by nature, he's going to fail, and vice versa. Machiavelli thinks most leaders ultimately fail because they just can't change their character to suit the times.
Which brings us to his incredibly controversial comment about the relationship between leadership and fortuna when he compares fortune to a woman.
Yes. And it's graphic and very charged language for us today. It definitely reflects the misogyny of his era.
Okay, but what's the point he's trying to make?
He argues that it is better to be impetuous than cautious because fortune is a woman and it is necessary to beat her and strike her down.
Wow.
The point he's making, if we set aside the really doggled analogy, is that calculated risk-taking and audacity are sometimes required to seize an opportunity presented by chance. You can't just be passive and overly cautious.
Oh, okay, that sets the stage perfectly for what you called the immoral handbook section. If the new prince's main goal is to stabilize power and, maybe more importantly, to found a stable political state,
then Machiavelli is very clear. This requires a willingness to use extra-legal methods.
outside the law.
The creation of a durable state, a fresh founding, is his highest ideal because it guarantees long-term stability for everyone. And to get there, the prince sometimes have to operate outside the normal moral framework.
Which is where we have to address his most famous maxim,
Yep.
that it is better for a ruler to be widely feared than to be greatly loved.
Yes.
Why is fear the more reliable foundation for power?
Because Machiavelli has a deeply, deeply cynical view of human nature. He says that love is held by a chain of obligation, which men will break whenever it suits their own advantage.
Because men are wretched creatures.
Exactly. Fear, on the other hand, is maintained by the threat of punishment, a dread that never ever fails.
So love is unreliable, but the threat of punishment is always there. It's a reliable motivator to keep people in line.
Precisely. If a ruler is too lenient because he wants to be loved, he risks disorder and chaos, which ends up hurting everyone. Fear is a necessary tool, but, and this is a key caveat, he says the prince must avoid being hated.
Okay, so feared but not hated.
Right. Don't seize the property or the women of your subjects. Fear of the ruler's power is one thing. Hatred of the ruler's person is political suicide.
He also gives the prince advice on mastering this environment by using the nature of both men and beasts.
This is the enduring metaphor of the fox and the lion. He says relying only on lawful conduct, the way of men, isn't enough, because the world is full of people who won't keep their promises. So the prince must learn to be the fox to avoid the snares, and a lion to overwhelm the wolves.
The fox uses deceit. The lion uses brute force. You need to master both cleverness and overwhelming power.
And this leads directly to the core of what we're calling strategic immorality. The prince must be willing to act against every traditional moral virtue you can imagine.
If the preservation of the state demands it.
Yes. Acting against mercy, against faith, against humanity, against religion.
That's a staggering list.
It is. But again, this is the effectual truth. This is how you survive in the real world. But, and this is a crucial layer, he adds, you must always appear to be compassionate, faithful, honest, and devout.
The appearance is critical. Why?
Because the masses, the common people, judge by appearances and by results. The prince has to maintain a virtuous public reputation. It secures their goodwill. But internally, privately, the prince must be ready to act the complete opposite when political necessity requires it.
So the true skill, the real virtue, is being able to wear the mask and only act against your stated values when you absolutely have to.
Exactly. Never out of personal malice or just for the sake of it. And this cold, pragmatic need leads to some of the most chilling advice in the book, especially about how to use cruelty.
He gets incredibly specific about how to be cruel, which
Yeah.
I guess shows his focus on maximizing stability.
He says that when you injure someone, you must do it in a way that they can't possibly seek revenge.
Total.
And crucially, any cruel deeds needed to secure power should be done all in one stroke. A single swift atrocity is slowly forgotten by the population. But if the ruler is hesitant and doles out cruelty slowly over time, he has to forever keep a knife by his side.
Because his subjects will never stop hating him.
They'll never trust him.
Yeah.
And this is where his advice gets truly ruthless, linking that idea directly to founding a new state.
Yeah.
We have to bring up his suggestion about exterminating previous ruling family.
Okay.
He advises a new prince, when conquering a territory, to just exterminate the previous ruling family entirely.
Which is shocking, but what's the reasoning?
It's based on prudence, not sadism. He argued this single, swift atrocity would actually be more merciful in the long run.
More merciful. How?
Because letting the family survive would create a center of resistance.
Yeah.
That would lead to prolonged instability, future disorders, murders, robberies, things that would harm the entire population for decades.
So it's the ultimate cost-benefit analysis of power. Commit one massive injustice now to prevent years of chaos for future generations.
That is the very definition of political expediency. It forces you to confront the morality of the founding act itself. And speaking of state stability, before we get to the big misquote, we should touch on his focus on the military.
Right, his own experience in Florence made him really suspicious of outside help.
Deeply suspicious. Machiavelli strongly distrusted and condemned mercenaries. He believed they were motivated only by money and were therefore totally unreliable in a real crisis.
So what was the alternative?
He insisted that a leader's main focus has to be the art of war, and that you have to use citizen soldiers. A policy he actually implemented in Florence, by the way.
Okay, let's do it. Let's tackle the phrase that has defined Machiavelli for 500 years, the one on every coffee mug. The ends justify the means. Did he ever actually say it?
He did not. It's the single most enduring misattribution in political philosophy.
He never used that phrase verbatim.
Never.
So how did his writing lead to that interpretation? What's the closest he actually came?
Well, what he wrote definitely gives license to the concept. In chapter 18, he's talking about how hard it is for princes to keep promises. And he says that where there is no tribunal to which we can appeal, we look to results, or the end.
Okay.
And he continues by saying that if the prince successfully establishes and maintains the state, then the means will always be judged honorable and be approved by everyone.
So the stability and success of the state is the ultimate validator. If the result is good governance and order, the public basically retroactively approves of the methods you used.
Exactly. The outcome validates the deeds, at least in the eyes of the public and of history. We judge a founding father by his success, not necessarily by the ruthlessness he used to get there.
And the phrase itself actually comes from somewhere else, doesn't it?
It does. Interestingly, the original Latin phrase that captures this, exitus acta probat, the outcome justifies the deed, is originally attributed to the Roman poet Ovid, centuries before Machiavelli.
And there's a historical context, too, with this maxim being used as political slander.
Absolutely. The phrase was also slanderously attributed to Jesuit theologians by their political opponents, both Protestants and other Catholics, during the 17th century.
They used it as propaganda.
They did. Now, Jesuit theologians did discuss how the moral justification of the means flows from the end, but they were a long way from endorsing pure immorality. It's a recurring theme, really, applying a simple, catchy maxim to attack a political rival.
So after 500 years, the book endures, not because it taught people to be ruthless, they already were, but because it forced them to confront the moral cost of power. Machiavelli, the crystal-clear realist, forced us to look at the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And the fact that this book is still so relevant suggests that maybe human nature hasn't changed all that much.
And that, I think, is the lingering power of the book. It's a challenge to every leader and every citizen who asks why politics is so often such a brutal game.
And this brings us back to that terrible calculus of power for you to consider as you reflect on this deep dive. We discussed Machiavelli's advice to eliminate a previous ruling family entirely. This act is the height of political expediency, justified by that ultimate goal of stability.
So for you, the listener, the question remains. If you are in charge of securing a fragile state today, and you are faced with the certainty that prolonged low-level disorder will lead to years of bloodshed and poverty, what is the moral calculation? Is it justifiable to commit a great, swift injustice now, an act of terrible virtù, to guarantee stability and prevent greater chaos for future generations? You have to decide if you have the temperament and the courage to pay that moral price.